All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this edition of CloudBytes hosted by Dean Dorton. Today we're going to be diving into the third Sage Intacct release of 2023 presented by our software service manager, Don Parker. And we're also going to be joined today by Kevin Cornwell, IT Audit Associate Director at Dean Dorton, who will be giving us a brief overview of the SEC's new rule on cybersecurity disclosure. If you have any questions throughout the webinar for either of our speakers, please use the Q&A icon to ask. We'll be monitoring these questions throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure to share your questions with our presenters during the Q&A period at the end. If we don't address your question today during the session, or if you think of one after we finish, contact information will be included in the follow-up email and at the end of the session, and we encourage you to reach out as needed. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording and slides in that follow-up email as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and please don't hesitate to ask questions. I know there's a lot to cover in this release, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dawn.
Well, thank you everyone for taking time to join us this afternoon. As she said, my name is Dawn Parker. I'm one of the software services managers here at Dean Dorton, and I'm very excited to share with you today the 2023 release 3 offerings for Sage Intacct. As you will notice here on our screen, you have 3 icons that you will see throughout the presentation. The first one is the little gear icon, and that means to enjoy that new feature, there's some configuration needed. Then you'll see the little lock icon, and that means that some permission changes are needed. And then you've got your lounge chair and your umbrella. That means you can sit back and enjoy, and you already have that feature and there's nothing needed. So just take note of those icons as we go throughout the presentation. The first thing we're going to look at is some early adopters. And the early adopters are things that you can reach out to us, and we can reach out to support and ask them if you're a candidate for that early adopter feature. They're currently in beta testing, so you would be using them before they're at general release. So keep that in mind if you decide you want to take advantage of some of these features. The first one is consolidation. If you have the global consolidation subscription, consolidation now will handle partial ownership through some tiered consolidation features. And that, again, is an early adopter. So please let us know if you have the global consolidation subscription and would like to take advantage of that. Now in cash management, there is some bank transaction import experience where you can assign customers to the bank transaction import. And then for accounts receivable, you can take a single payment and apply it to multiple customers. In the past, you could not do that, but now you can take that one payment and apply it across multiple customers if you have that need. So again, if you would like to take advantage of these early adopter features, please reach out to erpsupport@ddaftech.com, and we will let Sage know that you would like to be a candidate for those features. We're going to now jump into a few budget and planning offerings that came along with Release 3 2023. And for Sage Intacct Planning, you can now, it allows you to duplicate your budgets. You can easily create new budgets with these following options. You can duplicate or save your working budget. You can select specific versions to include, or you can include all versions. So if you have the Sage Intacct Planning module, then those are now available. For our healthcare clients, all of our healthcare clients, or at least most of them, have an EMR system, electronic medical record system. Now Sage has an integration between ERM Connect and Sage Intacct, so there's no longer that need to convert your electronic medical record extract file to the Sage Intacct import format. So, and before you would have taken that download from your EMR and put it in the Sage Intacct import format, and there would have been some, back and forth of trying to get that in the correct format. But now that EMR Connect integration takes that need away. So that is a big deal that our healthcare clients can take advantage of. For payroll, back at the end of 2022, Sage Intacct Payroll, powered by ADP, was announced and released, but it was released in somewhat of an infancy stage. Over the past several months, it has grown and they keep adding great things to it. So if you are a client that has 50 or more employees and you are interested in Sage Intacct Payroll, absolutely reach out to us. We are implementing some clients now that are very excited about it, and we would love for you to take advantage of that as well. Some things that they have added in this latest release are benefit administration decision support. So that allows your employees to select the benefit offerings that are right for them with a personalized approach through a series of questions and steps to guide them. They've also added the recruitment and talent acquisition work opportunity tax credit. So that allows them to increase screening compliance and capture more tax savings across more eligible applicants. They added HR Assist. So you work with a dedicated support team of certified HR professionals to help you with HR operations, including state and federal compliance resources, compliance and knowledge updates, HR checkups, and audit and compliance wizard, and much more. So you've got HR professionals right at your fingertips. They also added the timekeeping kiosk. The timekeeping kiosk is a kind of like what we were used to back to the time clock when you punch in and punch out, but it's a shared device that is used for timekeeping, such as a tablet. And then they added the voice of the employee. It allows you to collect feedback from employees and gauge their sentiment throughout the employee lifecycle. The response analytics provide you insight to help you make more informed decisions about benefits and offerings for your employee. So those are 5 great new enhancements to Sage Intacct Payroll. And if that is a subscription that you're interested in, certainly let us know. Now we'll jump into a few changes in the company and administration area. The first is that are some permission changes. The bank transaction permission for integrations now has a name change. It's called Bank Transactions for API and Import. And the benefit of that is the permission renamed to better reflect the functionality. So it's just a name change to help you understand what that functionality does. For our nonprofit clients, if you are a nonprofit school, a K-12 private or charter school or faith-based school, you probably know what FACTS is. FACTS is a tuition management, fee collection, and financial management tool for schools. And so Sage now has an integration between FACTS and Sage Intacct. FACTS is the leading provider of tools and solutions for K-12 through schools in the U.S. But this connected suite allows you to connect your tuition and your fees and financial management right with your fund accounting in Sage Intacct. So that's a direct integration that our clients that are K-12 schools are quite excited about. If you're a nonprofit and you took advantage of the nonprofit quick start template, you can now entities selected as funds are hidden from your entity drop-down list. And the benefit of that is it allows you to view all of your entities on the entity information page while removing funds from that navigation. So it somewhat splits up your funds and entity navigation to keep those separate if that is something that you need as a nonprofit. Okay, if you have the projects or grant module, you should be super excited about this next feature. And this allows you to view your budgets in your project or grant summary tab. So if you see in the graphic over to the left, it's cut off a little bit, but you see it's clicked on the project and grant summary tab. And on that tab, you now will be able to compare your budget to actuals. So that is a great enhancement that allows you to view your project or grant's efficiency and productivity and progress all on that one tab if you subscribe to the project or grant module. For the general ledger, it now allows you to exclude adjustments on the trial balance report. So in the past, you would see those, but now you can choose to include or exclude them, which simplifies that report and reduces the information it contains. So if we take a look here at this report, you see that it is including the adjusting debit and credit columns. With just a click of a button, just a click of a checkbox, I can choose to exclude it. So there's nothing needed. You see the little lounge chair and umbrella. There's no permission changes needed for this and no configuration changes. It's truly just a checkbox when you go to run your trial balance. You can choose it each time that you run the report if you want to see adjustments or not. Time and expenses. If you subscribe to the time and expense module, the bank files can now be used for employee expense reimbursements. And this benefit is after an expense report is approved, you can select the expenses to reimburse and generate the bank file. Now you'll see that we've got the configuration icon and the permission icon because both are needed for you to take advantage of this feature. So just keep in mind when you go back and you've seen something today that you want to use, you might want to come back to this slideshow that's going to be sent out to you and see what's needed because you may jump into your instance and not see these features. And it's not that you don't have them most likely because everybody's on the same version. It's just that there's likely a configuration change needed or a permission change. Now for some advanced reporting options. If you have the interactive custom report writer, the ICRW, there's a few changes that were added here. For users familiar with SQL and XML that use custom SQL reports, you previously changes to customer SQL required recreating report formats. You no longer have to create the formatting when changing columns, modifying text, or reordering view. And there's a new feature button, Apply XML. So if you subscribe to ICRW, there's nothing you need to do there. Again, that feature is readily available to you, and you can jump in and start to use it. For some user label changes, these are just label changes in the system that you may or may not notice. The location of the first one is a PDF of posted payment. That PDF previously included the invoice due date. That has been removed. In cash management permissions, previously the bank transactions for integrations was what it was called. That name has been changed to bank transactions for API and import to better reflect what that functionality does. Under company and my preferences, in the past, it said use enter key, not the tab key to move between fields. That wording has been changed to use the enter key to move between fields. Also in company, under document sequence information, the item change was the field list. All fields are now displayed on the same page and many are renamed. So there's several fields there that you may notice have different names. Under general ledger and statistical accounts, the report type field has been removed. So those are some label changes that either have been renamed or removed that you may notice in your system. Under accounts receivable, document sequencing, what's new is that you can track payments with document sequencing. So for example, if you have a posted payment that was applied to multiple invoices and adjustments, you can run a custom report based on the payment ID to see which transactions the payment was applied to. With document number sequences, Intacct automatically generates the new IDs for common transactions and records. First, you set up a document sequence for AR payments, then Intacct automatically generates a payment ID for all new posted payments. So that benefit, it allows you to refer to specific posted payments and really helps with tracking reconciliation. And you'll notice there that gear icon, so there are some configuration changes that have to be made for you to take advantage of that. This feature, this next slide just tells you what has to be done in configuration. You go to accounts receivable, setup, configuration, document sequences, and payments to turn on that functionality. Okay, also in accounts receivable, you can apply payments from invoices to a list in a multi-currency company. So when an invoice has a state of posted and meets the following conditions, the invoice was created at the same entity level in which you are viewing the invoices, and the amount is a positive amount. Then you can now apply payments for individual invoices directly from the invoice list. Previously, you only available for single currency companies. It is now the change here is that it's available for multi-currencies companies, and it increases your efficiency. Okay, the next three features that we're going to talk about, we're going to go through pretty quickly here in the slideshow, and then we're going to jump into a live demo. The first one is vendors payable, vendor approval. So you can now approve your vendors prior to use them. So it allows you to manage that vendor approval process, and that ensures accuracy of vendor records before using them in accounts payable purchasing, and that approval history is available. So in the past, you had bill approval and payment approval, but you could not approve the actual vendor. So this new step is vendor approval, and it requires configuration and permission changes, which we'll see in just a moment when we look at the live demo. So this slide just explains some of the things that we'll see, that you have to enable those permissions, and we'll walk through that. The next thing is purchasing match tolerances. So this new feature in the purchasing module automatically compares quantities and unit prices that appear on purchasing transactions. So it reduces your risk of fraud and financial loss, prevents reimbursement of unauthorized purchases, and helps identify frequent mistakes on receipts and vendor invoices. So if you have a history of receiving different amounts or different quantities or dollar amounts than the purchase order was for, this will help you track and prevent that. Also, this match tolerance feature, there's some configuration changes and some permission changes that we'll walk through in the demo. The next thing that we'll look at in our demo are list enhancements. And this list enhancement, it's in beta, so you have the opportunity to use this feature before it's in general release, and you will also can turn it on and off to see if you like it or not, but it allows you to personalize your list. You can leverage advanced filtering, you can manage list and record details side by side using a split view. You can customize columns. You have advanced filtering. It has a filter count to show you how many filters you have on. You can click and drag to relocate your columns, which I love that. So maybe you want to see vendor number, vendor name before ID. You can do that. You can resize the column widths. There's just a great wealth of features here for list enhancements that we'll take a look at in our demo. So I am going to switch over. Now you should see my Sage Intacct screen, and we're going to take a look at some of these features. The first feature that we want to look at is the AP vendor approval. So we talked about that you have to turn on this feature. I want you to notice that we'll switch back and forth. I'm logged into the same company as two different users. I'm logged in, you'll see, as Carla the controller into my demo company, All Are Well Food Shuttle. And then I also am logged into this same company as an approver user because I want to show you how to use this vendor approval and the PO matching, and that required me to have 2 users. So I'm going to go down to Applications, and I'm going to go to Accounts Payable, Setup, and then I'm going to go to Configuration to show you how to turn on this feature to enable the AP vendor approval. So if I come down, right below bill approval, you see vendor approval settings. So if you want to take advantage of this great feature that's been added, you can choose the checkbox to enable vendor approval. And then if you want to receive notifications or send out notifications when there are vendors that need to be approved by those that have permissions to approve them, then you can enable the email notifications. So that would be step 1. I'm going to cancel that because I've already set up that feature. Now I'm going to go show you the permissions. So I'm going to go to Company, Admin. You could go to Users or Roles depending on how your permissions are set up. I'm going to go to Roles because I know that Carla, the controller, and my approver user, they're both set up as admin user. But I'm going to go to my admin role. I'm going to go to Subscriptions. I'm going to go to Accounts Payable and choose Permissions. And now I'm going to go down to it says Approve Vendors. Approve Vendors right here. And you need to have List checked if you want that user or that role to have the ability to approve vendors. So you see that mine is marked, and I'm going to cancel. And now we're going to go back to Accounts Payable and take a look. So I'm going to go back to Accounts Payable. I'm going to go to All and Vendors. And you see here that I have Hearken Utilities. Well, Hearken Utilities was set up incorrectly from the beginning. It should be Hearken Utilities Services. This will work the same way if I make a change to a vendor or if I create a new vendor. So I'm going to edit Hearken Utilities, and I'm going to make the name Hearken Utility Services as it should have been when it was first created, and I'm going to submit it. Now, if I look for Hearken, you're going to see that it's in a submitted status because it's not approved yet because I have vendor approvals turned on. You see the rest of my vendors are having approved status, but Hearken just says submitted. So I'm going to jump over to my approver user. I'm going to refresh the screen so it can catch up with what I just did. Actually, let me show you one other thing. If I go try to enter a bill before I approve it, so the vendor is still in a submitted status. It has not been approved, and I'm going to go to Bills, and I'm going to try to add a new bill. And I'm going to choose my vendor as Hearken Utility Services. And as soon as I do that, you will see a message that pops up that says this vendor is in a submitted state. You cannot post the transaction. I could enter it as a draft, but I could not post it until that vendor is approved. So I just want to show you that, and I'm going to cancel it. Jump over to my approver user. I'm going to go to Accounts Payable. I'm going to go to All and then Approve Vendors. And you'll see that my Hearken Utility Services is here, and I can view it, approve it, or decline it. I'm going to choose to approve it. I could enter comments if I would like. I'm going to approve this vendor, jump back over, refresh my screen for my Carla controller user. And now I'm going to enter a bill to Hearken Utility Services. So now when I do that, you will see that I no longer get an error message, and now I can submit and post this transaction because that vendor has been approved. that would work the same way if it was a new vendor or a vendor that had changes. So I'm going to cancel out of this. So the feature that we just looked at was the approved vendors feature. And remember that if you want to take advantage of that, you will first need to set up the configuration, and then you will need to set up the permissions before that is available to you. The next thing we're going to look at is our list enhancements. So I'm going to go to Accounts Payable and Vendors. And you'll notice here that I've got the little round circle with the eye in it, and I can turn on List Beta Interface. So look at the view that I have now for vendors. I'm going to choose to turn on my new beta interface. And now you will notice that I have some different features, that my view looks quite different. I can choose the split view using this little page view looking here. If I click here, now I have a split view. I can click on the name and quickly see the details about my vendor on the right. So that's called the split view. I can quickly change back to my original view by just clicking on that icon again. I can see I can click on the little gear icon to configure my columns. By doing that, let's say that I want to know which vendors have a W-9 on file. I can choose that checkbox and choose Apply, and it quickly adds the column and shows me which vendors have a W-9 on file. I can click on filters here and see what filters I have selected. I have selected a status of active and a one-time use as false. I can click on the minus sign and delete those filters. I can click on the plus sign and add a new filter right here on the fly. I can click in the drop down under each column, and if I want to quickly change from active to inactive vendors, I could choose that checkbox. I don't have any inactive vendors here, but if I did, it would filter those right on the fly. I can drag and drop columns. Let's say that I want vendor name before vendor ID. So I can quickly drag it over. Well, it's not cooperating, but you can drag and drop those columns as you would like to see the different views. You can change the size of the columns by just dragging the little line over. And then let's say you're finished and you're not ready to turn on this to keep this view for all the time. You can turn off beta just by choosing this little turn off beta here on the top left. You can also, this is beta testing, so Sage wants your feedback. So you can click on Send Us Feedback and type in information for Sage, your feedback, and it'll send that to them. If you're done and you don't want to continue to use this feature, just click on Turn Off Beta, and it quickly goes back to the view that you've been used to. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is the purchase match option. So I'm going to go over to purchasing, and then I'm going to go to setup. The first thing we need to do, and just like we did with accounts payable, is we need to set up the configuration. So I'm going to go down to configuration, and I'm going to choose to enable match tolerance. Mine is already enabled, but once you choose that checkbox, you choose which transaction definition that you want to validate. I want to validate that my vendor invoice is within 1% tolerance of my purchase order. You choose the percentage that you'll allow that's tolerable for your organization, but I've chosen 1% when my purchase order is converted over to an invoice. So that's the first thing that you need to do. The second thing you need to do is to set up your permissions. So I'm going to go to company. I'm going to go to admin. Again, this is a role-based organization. So I'm going to go to my admin role. and check subscriptions. Going to go to purchasing and choose permissions. And I'm going to go down to where it says purchasing transactions. You see here it says purchasing transactions, and over on the far right, this person that's going to override exceptions needs this checkbox marked. So if you want this user or this role to be able to overwrite exceptions that exceed your tolerance, my tolerance is 1%, then you need to have this checkbox marked here where it says override exception. So I'm going to cancel this. So now we have our configuration set up, we have our permissions set up. Now we're ready to use this feature. So I'm going to jump back over. I'm going to go to purchasing, and I'm going to go to all. I'm going to go to order and purchase order. And now you can see that I have here a purchase order PO 54 to ABC Office Supplies in a pending state. So I'm going to edit that and show you what I ordered from ABC Supplies. And if we come down, you'll see that I ordered 10 desk chairs for $50 each. I ordered some pretty inexpensive desk chairs. Your back may hurt after sitting in those chairs, but anyway, I ordered some pretty inexpensive desk chairs for $50 each, and I wanted 10 of those. So let's say those came in, and I wanted to convert this to a vendor invoice. So I'm going to go to convert, and I'm going to go to vendor invoice. But let's say that I didn't get 10, I only got 8. Remember, my purchase match tolerance is at 1%. So I wanted 10, I got 8. Remember, this feature, it works for quantity and price. So I could set up a variation. Maybe they charge me $60 each. I could set up variations either place on the quantity or the price or both. So I'm going to say I got 8, and I'm going to post it. And now it brings me to my vendor invoice transaction definition. And you'll notice that this ABC's Office Supplies invoice is in an exception state. If we take a look at that, it's in an exception state because I got 8 chairs. I asked for 10. If I click on my little icon here under exception, it says my quantity variance is 20%. Remember, my tolerance is only 1%. So I'm going to cancel here, and I'm going to jump over to my approver user. I'm going to refresh my screen so that my data can catch up from my Carla controller user. I'm going to go down to purchasing, and I'm going to go to invoice, vendor invoice. And we see here this ABC supply that's in the exception state. My approver user has the correct permissions. They're an admin user. They have the correct permissions to override that. So I'm going to edit it. And you'll see now that I have the option to overwrite the exception. If this user did not have that checkbox marked to allow them to do that, then they would not have that override exception box here. So I'm going to override the exception. And now you see that it's in a pending state. So now you can carry on with your normal purchase order transaction flow. So whatever your workflow is for purchasing, from here out, you can carry forward with that because that exception has been overridden because this approver user had permission to do that. Okay, so that is the end of our demo. I'm going to stop share so that Kevin can move forward. And then at the end, we will answer your questions. So please put those questions in the chat. And Kevin will now share his screen and we'll answer questions when he's done.
Thank you, Dawn. All right, as a quick introduction, I lead our IT audit and compliance area, and we thought this would be helpful to provide just a very quick and brief overview of some SEC cybersecurity changes that have come across. It's going to affect all public companies. And so anyway, if you fall into that category, then please stay on the line. And again, I'm only going to take 6 or 7 minutes to go over this. Hopefully that's all as long as it takes. So to start with, the SEC has been putting out regulatory changes in regards to cybersecurity for a number of years. And the latest that came out was around disclosure of security incidents. And the objective is to provide a consistent way for companies to disclose those incidents, because right now it's kind of haphazard and there wasn't a clear direction. And so some companies would use different forms. And again, it was in need of some guidance there. And this is going to be applicable to all public companies, and it will become effective in September. The overall summary of this is any material cybersecurity incidents will be required to be reported on Form 8K for domestic companies and Form 6K for foreign private issuers. So what's this look like? So Form 8K is required to be submitted within 4 days of discovery, and discovery is important. Most cybersecurity incidents do not get detected day one. They can sit in the environment for weeks or months even, but the clock doesn't get ticking for submitting the Form 8K until discovery. And that form is going to have this information requested on it. So basically, what was the date it was discovered and whether it's ongoing or been remediated. Now, I'll tell you, most security incidents cannot be remediated within 4 days. They usually have longer lasting ramifications. So it's going to be very rare that you could discover it in 4 days and then turn around and say, oh, we're done. And here's what happened. It wasn't a big deal, or it was a big deal, kind of instant. But that it doesn't have to be completed or remediated during the time of this this filing. And again, it typically won't be. It will request a brief description of the incident, a non-technical, and you wouldn't want to do technical anyway, because that could potentially release information that might make it easier for bad actors to compromise your system, or even if you provided a little bit of detail and here is the system, our CMR system or ERP system was impacted, you probably want to avoid any level of detail and be very high level so that it doesn't give additional bad actors some fodder to work with. Then whether any data was stolen, altered, deleted, accessed, you may not know that within 4 days. So that could be an item where you say, well, that's part of the ongoing discovery. It's very difficult sometimes to identify whether data is stolen or not to begin with. The impact on operations, and then whether remediation is complete or in progress. And again, I think most of the time these filings are going to be, we've identified this on X number of on X date. Here's what we've discovered so far. Someone had, gotten into our environment. We've blocked off access, and we're continuing to investigate the impact. And this is an ongoing investigation. Now, there's also an annual Form 10K that's going to be submitted annually, and this is really kind of a temperature of your cybersecurity risk assessment program, and ensuring that that program aligns with overall business strategy and what third parties you're relying on to keep the risk assessment program alive and well. So again, it's not unusual to outsource some of this work, which is completely fine. But if you do, whether it's in maintaining the cybersecurity program or during an incident response, you bring in an outside group of forensic auditors or cybersecurity experts. Either way, as long as those are identified on the Form 10K, you'll be fine. Now so those are the requirements. That's the regulatory checklist that needs to be completed. What's I think really important is, okay, how do we prepare for this? What do we need to do to be ready for this? So that's what the next couple slide or two is for. And so number one is ensure you've got a documented incident response plan, and that it includes in there the SEC requirements. So any IRP, a component of it is, okay, who do we need to notify under certain conditions? And that could be clients, customers, those could be state privacy notice regulation requirements. It's going to be SEC now. So make sure that the plan you've got, the checklist on how to handle an incident, includes, oh, by the way, we need to notify the SEC within 4 days. The next thing it's got to do, and this is define materiality in relation to a number of factors here: business strategy, operations, and the financial condition. Of all the things in the rule, this is the one that I believe is the most vague or subject to interpretation. So what's materiality? Well, if you have financial audits performed on your organization, the auditors have a formula for defining what materiality is, and it's a dollar amount. If some transaction or event occurs and it's off by this much, or it's above this threshold, we need to look at it. Well, when it comes to cybersecurity events, there is a way to assign a dollar value, but materiality is also a little bit less objective and more subjective, because there's security. If there's any kind of element to a poor security control, or you might even consider public relation hit that occurs from a disclosed incident. So anyway, materiality will be part art, part science when determining whether it needs to go to a Form 8K. So again, I think every scenario is going to have to go through that process, but it will help to have some of that criteria defined ahead of time. Some of it can be, but it's going to be a judgmental call during the actual incident. You will need a cybersecurity risk assessment process, ideally documented in a policy, that describes how to perform a risk assessment, an IT security risk assessment. So most organizations do those annually. They use a cybersecurity framework as a guideline to make sure they're covering all the bases, but conducting a risk assessment on at least an annual basis is I'll say the best practice and the normal assumption for most requirements. There will need to be an element for board oversight of cybersecurity risks. This is actually a little less stringent than what they originally proposed. The original proposal was you had to have somebody on the board that was basically a cybersecurity expert or had a lot of experience in that area. Well, that reality set in when they got comment and feedback on that is, there's just not enough cybersecurity experts to go around to put members on the board like that. So what they did, they nixed that, but there is still a requirement, and I'd argue this was there before, it's just kind of written in stone now, that the board has some oversight of cybersecurity risks. And I'll tell you what some other regulations do that could meet this as well, is they require the CIO or the chief compliance officer or the chief risk officer to meet at least annually, maybe quarterly, and report to the board on the information security program status, how well it's doing, maybe even, providing updates on any security incidents. Again, it's going to be at a high level once it gets to the board, but the board needs to understand cybersecurity risk. But now it's okay if someone else provides that communication to them so that they can, again, determine if there's anything that needs to take priority. And then also, more on a day-to-day level, management's going to need to have a role in the cybersecurity risk program. So ensuring that they are actively involved and involved in communications, for instance, and things like that is part of the process. All right, so that was a real quick brief overview of the SEC rules. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Kevin, for that update. Again, like Kevin said, if you have any questions for Dawn or for Kevin, go ahead and use that Q&A functionality. We did have one come through for Dawn about the multiple customer payments in the Sage Intacct release. Dawn, can those multiple customer payments be made across entities?
Yes, they can. If the invoice was created at the same level in which they're viewing the invoices list, meaning that if you would need to have entered the invoice at the top level, and you would need to be viewing that list at the top level. If it was entered at the invoice was created at the entity level, then no, you would not be able to. But if it was created at the top level, it would not be a problem.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. So I don't see any more questions coming through, so we will go ahead and wrap up. Again, we appreciate everybody joining us today, and we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar via email to everyone who registered. That'll include the contact information for Dawn and Kevin. So if any other questions pop up, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. And we thank you all and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.